Title: Beyond the Shadows. A story of strength, sacrifice, and self-discovery. Chapter 1. The beginning of an unseen battle. I never expected to spend a decade of my life chasing after a shadow. Andrew Whitmore. The man who once saved me, the man I spent years waiting for, the man who never truly saw me. I met him in college, Columbia University, the place where dreams were born and crushed in the same breath. He was already someone back then. Andrew carried himself like the world owed him something, and maybe it did. He had ambition burning in his veins, an air of authority even as a student, and a confidence that made people want to be around him. I wasn't drawn to him because of that. I was drawn to him because, on one fateful day, he became my savior. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I stumbled, literally, into his life. My arms were overloaded with books, my mind cluttered with deadlines, and my feet, apparently, had a vendetta against me. One second I was walking across campus. The next, I was on the ground, my books scattered like fallen soldiers. A shadow loomed over me. Need some help? I looked up into piercing blue eyes. Andrew Whitmore. I didn't know him well then. He was a name, a face, a fleeting presence in my classes. I forced a smile. That obvious, huh? He chuckled, crouching down to gather my books. Just a little. We walked together to the library that day. It was the first time we talked. It wouldn't be the last. Chapter 2. The death that changed my life. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. Months after that chance meeting, a group of us went on a college trip to the Catskill Mountains. It was supposed to be fun, hiking, bonfires, stories under the stars. But nature had other plans. The storm rolled in fast. The air turned electric with the scent of rain, and before we knew it, the once stable hiking path became a death trap. One misstep, one moment of bad luck, and I was falling. I barely had time to scream before I hit the ground, my ankle twisting in an explosion of pain. The world spun, and for the first time in my life, I felt true terror. Then, his voice. Sophia, hold on, I'm coming. Andrew. He fought through the chaos, his hands gripping mine with an intensity that burned. He didn't let go, not when the ground was crumbling beneath him, not when he could have walked away and saved himself first. He carried me back to safety, his breath ragged, his arms steady. You saved my life, I whispered when it was over, when the paramedics wrapped my ankle. He just smiled. We look out for each other, right? That night, as the painkillers dulled my body, I made a decision. For the 10 hours he spent saving me, I would give him 10 years of my life. It was foolish. It was reckless. It was the beginning of my greatest mistake. Chapter 3. Becoming his shadow. Andrew's rise in the corporate world was inevitable. He had the name, the talent, and the drive. After graduation, he joined Whitmore and Associates, his father's law firm. It wasn't just a firm, it was an empire. I could have gone anywhere. My last name carried weight, my family's wealth opening doors most could never dream of. But I turned my back on it all. I applied to Whitmore and Associates like any other candidate. No connections, no special favors. I walked in as a nobody and earned my place as Andrew's secretary. For years, I was the woman behind the scenes. Sophia, move my meeting with the investors. Already rescheduled for Friday. Sophia, I need those reports. Sent them an hour ago. He never had to ask twice. I made sure of it. He never noticed the nights I worked late, the times I shielded him from office politics, the battles I fought for him. Behind closed doors. He never noticed me. Chapter 4. The parties that tested me. High society had always been Andrew Whitmore's playground. For years, I had watched him navigate it effortlessly, dressed in perfectly tailored suits, his charming smile disarming even the most hardened businessmen. He thrived in these events, standing beneath glittering chandeliers, sipping on expensive whiskey, shaking hands with men who controlled the economy like it was their personal chessboard. And I was always by his side. But never truly with him. Tonight was no different. The annual Whitmore and Associates Gala was the highlight of the corporate calendar, hosted at the Plaza, its grand ballroom shimmering under the glow of 1,000 lights. The air was thick with the scent of champagne and wealth. Women draped in designer gowns and men in crisp tuxedos moved gracefully through the room, their laughter polished, their words carefully calculated. I had spent the entire evening working, handling last-minute seating arrangements, smoothing over minor crises, making sure Andrew's schedule was perfectly aligned. By the time I had a moment to myself, I stood at the edge of the room, watching him. He looked effortlessly at home here, surrounded by people who saw him as their equal. He belonged, and I didn't. A waiter passed by, and I took a glass of champagne, the cool liquid doing nothing to soothe the heat rising in my chest. Then, it happened. Andrew stood near the center of the room, a glass in his hand, his deep voice carrying over the hum of conversation. He was smiling, his expression relaxed, confident. "To another successful year," he said, raising his glass. "And, of course, to my incredible secretary, Sophia, who ensures I don't drown in paperwork." Laughter erupted around him. A few people turned to glance at me, amusement flickering in their eyes. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass, but I forced my expression to remain neutral. It wasn't the first time he had made a joke at my expense. But tonight, something about it was different. Maybe it was the way he said it, so effortlessly dismissive. Maybe it was the way the laughter rang in my ears, echoing in the vast ballroom. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, I saw myself the way everyone else in that room did. Not as an equal, not as someone who had spent 10 years holding Andrew's world together, but as just his secretary. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, plastering a polite smile on my face as people clinked glasses around me. I had perfected this mask over the years, this ability to endure, to pretend. But inside, something cracked. I barely registered the rest of the speeches. The evening blurred into a haze of conversations I wasn't truly part of. Every interaction felt distant, like I had been wrong all along. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. I should have seen it coming. Maybe a part of me did. Maybe I had spent so many years lying to myself that I had started believing my own delusions. That if I just stayed a little longer, waited a little more, endured just a little bit of the humiliation, Andrew would finally look at me and see me the way I had always seen him. But fate had a cruel way of ripping off blindfolds. The day started like any other. I walked into Andrew's office, a folder of contracts in one hand, my tablet in the other. The city skyline stretched behind him, the golden light of the afternoon filtering through his massive windows. He was on a call, his voice steady, confident, the same voice I had memorized over the years. I waited patiently, standing near the door, pretending that my heart didn't still ache for him after all these years. Then, I heard it. "Victoria and I will make the announcement soon," he said. "It's the right decision for both our families." The right decision. I barely registered the rest of the call. The words blurred together, a distant hum in the background. My fingers clenched around the tablet, my nails digging into my palm. When he finally hung up, he looked at me like nothing had happened. Like the earth hadn't just cracked beneath my feet. "Sophia, I need you to handle the investors' follow-up reports," he said casually, as if my world hadn't just shattered in front of me. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You're getting engaged." He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" I lifted my chin, refusing to back down. "I heard you on the call, Andrew. You're getting engaged." He let out a breath and leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck like this was some minor inconvenience. "Yeah, my parents arranged it. It's nothing personal, nothing personal." The words sliced through me, sharp and cruel. I had spent a decade of my life believing, hoping, waiting, only to hear that his future had been decided without a second thought. Without me even being a factor in the equation. He must have noticed the shift in my expression because he sighed. "Sophia, it's just business. You know how these things work." I let out a bitter laugh. "Do I?" His brows furrowed. "Come on, don't be like that. It doesn't change anything." I stepped closer, my fingers tightening around the folder in my hands. "It changes everything, Andrew." My voice was barely above a whisper, but every word was laced with something raw, something I could no longer keep buried. For the first time in years, I let the truth slip through my carefully built walls. I have stood by you for 10 years. 10 years, Andrew, I said, my voice trembling, but I didn't stop. I built my life around you. I was there when no one else was. I fought your battles when you didn't even know you had them. I gave up everything for you. He stared at me, confused, like he couldn't comprehend why I was saying this. I exhaled shakily, a bitter smile curling my lips. And you're telling me it's nothing personal? A flicker of something crossed his eyes, hesitation. Guilt. But it was gone before I could grasp it. I didn't ask you to do any of that, Sophia, he said, his tone softer now. And that was it. That was the final dagger. No, he hadn't asked. I had done it willingly. I had loved him silently, without expectations. But I had never thought I was invisible to him. I had never thought I was replaceable. I nodded slowly, something inside me breaking in a way that couldn't be repaired. You're right, I whispered. You never asked. He opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned, walking out of his office with my back straight, my steps steady. I didn't cry, not yet, but as I reached my desk, as I looked at the years of my life spent in the shadow of a man who had never once seen me as more than an efficient secretary, I realized something. I had given him 10 years of my life. And I was done. Chapter 6. Walking away like a queen. I sat in my office, staring at my resignation letter for what felt like hours. The words blurred in front of me, but the meaning was crystal clear. I was leaving. After 10 years of devotion, of waiting, of believing, this was the moment I finally chose myself. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked print, the hum of the machine filling the deafening silence of my office. My mind was at war with itself. A part of me whispered, "You're making a mistake. He'll realize it one day." But the stronger, wiser part of me, the one that had been buried beneath years of unspoken heartbreak, finally spoke up. "No, Sophia, the mistake was waiting this long." I picked up the letter, smoothing out the paper. The final step was getting Andrew's signature. I knew him well enough to know he barely glanced at half the documents I put in front of him. I walked into his office like I had 100 times before. He was leaning back in his chair, skimming through his emails, completely unaware that this was the last time I would ever stand in front of him like this. "Andrew, you need to sign these documents," I said, my voice steady. He didn't look up. "Yeah, leave them on my desk." I hesitated for a split second. Was I hoping for something? A miracle, some divine intervention that would make him lift his head, really see me, and ask, "Sophia, what's wrong?" But he didn't. Because he never did. I placed the papers in front of him. Watched as he grabbed his pen, signed each one without reading. And just like that, I was free. It felt nothing like I had expected. There was no relief, no joy, no triumphant moment of victory. Instead, my heart ached with something I couldn't quite name. But I held my head high. I turned on my heel, walked out of his office, and closed the door behind me. For the first time in 10 years, I walked away without looking back. Chapter 7. The Man Who Saw Me. 2 years. I had rebuilt my life in those 2 years. Found myself again. And yet, sitting at this restaurant, waiting for a blind date my parents had set up, I felt an unease I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't sure if I was ready. Then I saw him, and the air left my lungs. Neil. He looked the same, warm brown eyes, that slightly mischievous smile, his presence as familiar as a favorite book. But there was something different too. A quiet confidence, a steadiness that I hadn't noticed before. He stood when he saw me, his lips curving into a knowing smile. "Well, this is unexpected." I laughed, shaking my head as I took the seat across from him. "Neil Parker, of all the people in the world." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "So, my competition for this date is me." I chuckled, but deep down, something stirred. I had spent so many years wrapped up in one person, so blinded by my feelings for Andrew, that I had ignored the people who had always been there for me. People like Neil. The waiter came, and we ordered, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Neil never once made me feel small. He didn't tease me about my past. He didn't look at me like I was broken. He just saw me. For the first time in years, I felt light. The weight of my past, of my mistakes, of my regrets, it all faded in his presence. And as we talked, as he made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years, I thought, maybe love was never supposed to feel like a war. Maybe it was supposed to feel like this. Chapter 8. The regret that came too late. 2 years after I walked away, Andrew found out the truth. He found out who I really was. I don't know how it happened. Maybe someone let it slip. Maybe curiosity got the better of him. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally started paying attention. But when he learned that I was Sophia Caldwell, the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the country, the woman who had abandoned everything just to stand by his side, something inside him cracked. He searched for me. He called my old number. Visited my old apartment. Asked around the office. But it was too late. I had already left that life behind. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he was different after that. That he was quieter, that something in him had changed. I wondered if, for the first time in his life, he finally understood what it meant to lose something that wasn't just convenient for him. One day, he reached out. A message. A simple text that arrived on my phone late at night. Andrew, I'm sorry. I stared at the words for a long time. And then, I did something I never thought I would. I deleted the message. Because for the first time in a decade, I owed him nothing. Late love is worse than no love at all. And I had already moved on. Epilogue. The final goodbye. It had been 3 years since I walked away. 3 years since I chose myself. And yet, here I was, standing face to face with the man I had once spent a decade waiting for. Andrew Whitmore. He looked the same, immaculate suit, sharp jawline, those piercing blue eyes that once made my heart stutter. But something was different now. There was an edge to him, a weariness in his gaze that hadn't been there before. I had run into him by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Life had a cruel sense of humor. The event was a corporate fundraiser for social initiatives, one of many that I now attended as a guest rather than a silent observer in the background. I had built a name for myself, carved a space in the world that belonged to me and no one else. But as I stood in front of him, in the grand ballroom of yet another lavish event, I felt no nervousness. No lingering ache. Just quiet finality. Sophia. His voice was low, rough, as if he had been waiting to say my name for a long time. I tilted my head slightly, offering a polite, detached smile. Andrew. His eyes searched mine, looking for something, anything, but I gave him nothing. You left, he said after a moment. I arched a brow. Yes, I did. He exhaled sharply, as if my calmness frustrated him. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything before you walked out? I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. You mean, why didn't I give you a chance to stop me? I met his gaze, unflinching. Because I didn't need your permission to leave, Andrew. His jaw tightened. I would have. Would have what? I cut him off, my voice steady. Would have convinced me to stay a little longer. Given me another reason to keep waiting for something that was never going to happen. A flicker of something, guilt, regret, crossed his face, but it was too late for that now. I didn't realize, he trailed off, his hands clenching into fists. I didn't know what you meant to me until you were gone. I sighed, a soft, almost pitying smile tugging at my lips. You never really knew me at all, Andrew. You only knew the version of me that existed to serve you. His breathing was uneven now, as if the weight of his mistakes had finally settled on his chest. I found out, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. About your family, about everything you gave up. You could have had any life you wanted, but you chose. You, I finished for him, my tone not unkind. I chose you, Andrew. And you never even noticed. He looked like he wanted to say something, like he wanted to take back every careless word, every moment he had dismissed me as just his secretary. But there was no erasing the past. I'm sorry, he said, the words raw, desperate. I was blind, and I forgive you, I interrupted, and his eyes snapped to mine. Not for you, but for myself. Because I don't want to carry the weight of you anymore. His lips parted, as if the finality of my words had finally broken something inside him. I stepped forward, just close enough that he could see, really see, that I was no longer the woman who once stood in his shadow. I loved you, Andrew. But I love myself more now. His entire body tensed, his hands curling at his sides, but he didn't try to stop me as I turned to leave. I walked away with my head held high, knowing he would never forget this moment. That was the difference between us now. I was free, and he would live with the regret of losing me for the rest of his life.